Hello and welcome to this month's Fintech Onramp. Just a reminder, if you're stumbling upon this whole conversation is geared towards Fintech founders or builders that are early in the process. Maybe too early, in fact, to get into accelerators where you have to have some POC customers or some logos that can showcase that you have buy-in from the marketplace, you have product market fit. So this conversation happens a bit earlier, before you have some of those first wins and you're trying to figure out how to go about crafting a sales motion. And the conversation we're going to have today is an important one. It's all around building champions and equipping champions. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce this conversation to the stage out here. And I'll just go ahead and talk to you about how we think in terms of positioning our fintech solutions, our services to bankers, whether those are bank employees or credit union employees, finding champions, how you identify if you have a champion, and then how you can go about equipping those people to carry the conversation forward inside their own institutions rather. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's start talking about, let me take this one slide at a time. The fact that you honestly, you might not have a champion. So I'm gonna just let's hit this hard right out of the gate. It's easy when we're selling. It's easy when we're having conversations with people at events, at trade shows, in the exhibit halls, to find people that like us as other humans, people that might buy into the solution and the idea that you're pitching. And people that might say something like this, I love it, or we loved it. Those are people that are not your champion. Or if you hear something like, yeah, let me take this back to the team or socialize this internally or take it to my boss, you don't really have a champion. You have somebody that is more of a baton relay type of individual that's going to help propel your message forward, but not your champion. Additionally, if you have the one person that wants to be in control of everything, that's going to be the conduit within a financial institution to communicate with you and communicate to the broader team, including the economic buyer and the decision maker within the organization, you don't really have a champion. You have an individual that might be, in essence, more of a bottleneck for you. And trust me, I get it. In the early days, we're just interested in people validating that our idea is a good one. So again, this conversation is before we get those first yeses. We're vying for POCs. We are trying to get a commercial agreement signed. So when you're in these conversations, sometimes you just want someone to talk to you. I know what you mean here. I've been there myself. But in these situations, don't confuse the person that likes your solution or that is willing to take it back to the team, or even the person that wants to control the conversation as champions. These are people and they're important to your opportunity and important to the success of your solution being sold into the institution. They're just not your champion. And I know this might feel like semantics, but it's important to identify who all of the buying committee members are. Now, there are some scenarios that, I guess if you want to talk about the importance of having a champion, let's just state the obvious, or perhaps something that's not so obvious. As part of selling your solution internally, there are going to be countless conversations that you're not even aware of. Conversations that are happening either without your knowledge or without you being in the room. And those conversations are equally important towards the success of your opportunity for a bank or for a credit union. What you don't always have that insider visibility into is who's having those conversations, what they're saying about your solution, if they like your solution, if they were involved in purchasing a competitive solution in the past and are proud of what they have now, if they're indifferent towards your solution. all of these types of things, all of these viewpoints, all of these perceptions and perspectives that are happening inside the organization feel better and go more smoothly when you have a champion that's having these conversations with you. And here's what I often find. If you look towards the left-hand side of the screen, sometimes we as early stage founders assume that whenever we present to them, we have an initial conversation. They think, and it's easy to think this way, so I'm not casting dispersions, but you might be thinking, they are evaluating us. They like us. They are now taking the next step. Maybe, maybe not. You may also think that the decision gets made when you're involved in the meeting, and that is rarely ever the case. You might also be under the assumption that because you have poured your heart and soul and your time and your money into this solution, and it's better than anything else out in the market, that means you're going to win. And the unfortunate thing that I have learned in decades of selling to bankers and to credit union employees is that's not always the case. The best product does not always win in these scenarios. And that's frustrating, but it is the truth, people. And we also tend to get in our own heads about silence. Sometimes we think that silence means that they've lost interest in us. Maybe the silence means something else. Maybe the silence means that they're heads down in another project. Maybe the silence does mean that they were confused about the way that we discussed the solution. You don't really know what that silence means. A champion would be able to tell you that. So I know you have these thoughts, or at least these are some things I have heard in my conversations with founders. What actually happens is shown on the right-hand side of the screen here. And I don't have to read these to you all. You'll find this if and when you need it. But the bank is really trying to evaluate how risky it is to bring you on board. And I'm not just speaking in terms of risk as compliance risk. I'm talking about that person's reputational risk, goodwill being burned by bringing you in and broadening the conversation within the organization. I'm talking about the risk of overwhelm, the risk of other strategic priorities falling to the wayside. There are a whole slew of risks that have absolutely nothing to do with your product, your SOC 2, Type 2, or any compliance standard. No, don't get me wrong, those exist as well. You need to have those buttoned up, or at least a plan to get them buttoned up. But the risk is much broader, and it's not simply financial. It's not simply risk related in the traditional compliance terms. You also have to think of risk for that person that you're speaking to in their career. You might also be thinking that, again, that decision does get made within the room that you're sitting in. I mentioned rarely. It's often through a series of committees, one if you're lucky, or a series of committees, maybe even a board decision based upon the complexity, the price point of the solution. Here's what I have found when it comes to best product or who wins. A lot of times the brand coverage has something to do with it. Just as important as well is the internal business case being made for a solution when a founder is not in the room. And here's the hard truth. Silence may mean that people don't like your solution or they've lost interest. It truly might. But that silence is often more indicative of the people inside the institution's four walls not knowing how to propel your solution forward, or even how to go back and tell you we don't get it. So a lot of times that silence is, it's just a stalemate. We don't know what to do with you or how to move you forward. And this is where we as founders, this is where we as sellers can help with those scenarios. Okay. We'll go ahead and take a look at the next conversation here, because this is what a champion really is. A champion is not the one that just says, I love it, let me take it back, or everything has to go through me. As a champion really passes these three tests. They have a personal win, meaning they're invested in the success of your solution. Personally, their career, their business unit, perhaps something in their day wins. They also have some sort of internal credibility. It is tough to have the person that owns the problem not be liked or trusted within the organization, especially if they don't have signing authority. So your champion, when you're looking for these individuals and identifying them and testing them and equipping them, you need to make sure that these are individuals that are at the right level and or have the right experience or the right perception about them within the organization. I think absolutely hands down, the biggest and best test is that they also have some political capital that they're willing to spend on your behalf. Think about it like this. If you were speaking with a champion and they love your solution, it would help them and their teams immensely, and they're well regarded. If that individual says, all right, here's who we need to get involved at this institution to carry this decision forward. We need to have the CFO. We need to have the technology committee on board as well. Why don't we go ahead and get IT in here? And also let's make sure that compliance is on board. Those early deals that you're working, trust your champion to tell you. In the future though, take those learnings and you be prepared to tell your future champions exactly what they just told you. That conversation in the future sounds like, when we're in discussions with organizations like yours, we find that the next step is to pull in this person, this person, this person, and this person. And you're just regurgitating your learnings from early discussions and you're guiding the process forward. You might not yet have all the information or know all the players. It's perfectly okay. You're in the early days of selling your solution. But over time, you want that information and you want to lead with it. And a good test of a champion is if they're willing to bring those other people into the conversation. If they're willing to put their own neck and reputation and personal capital on the line to foster goodwill and bring the CFO, the chief compliance officer, IT individuals, and others from the technology committee into the conversation with you. That's what you want. You want a champion that passes these 3 tests. They're invested in it. They have that credibility and they're willing to use that credibility on your behalf. Now, moving forward out here, I have found that there are times in which it's easy to conflate different roles or different people that could look like your champion. And I put some examples out here. The first one is the easiest one to get wrong. And that's going back to the first slide, the person that loves it. They are gushing about your solution. They're telling you, oh my goodness, we need your product. It would solve X, Y, and Z for us. They might have genuine enthusiasm, but if they don't have any authority, or are not willing to create authority and create and spend some goodwill, then they're not your champion, okay? You might also have the person that I think of in terms of the coach, the person that is willing to give you inside information about what's happening within the organization, but they may not have the direct business tie-in to solving the problem that your solution does solve. It's not their problem. They may not be on a buying committee. They may not have the authority to approach the buying committee or approach the CFO and invite them into a meeting. But they might have information that they've gathered from conversations or meetings, okay? I have found in the past some of the best coaches might be individuals that have titles such as executive assistants or administrative assistants, or individuals that are often coordinating meetings on your behalf. These are people that are often just placed in a unique position of knowledge and connectivity. They know the conversations that are happening behind the scenes. They're coordinating the meetings, and they may hear things like, I don't know, just grab any open time on my calendar. I don't let's put this one to bed early. Versus, I want this meeting held within the next 2 weeks because we need to make a decision on this. It's a big priority for us next year. Those individuals have, they're privy to inside knowledge. So know about those coaches, use their insights and their information, but again, know that they're not going to be your champion. There's also the skeptic. Sometimes these can be called anti-champions. These are people that if I'm not careful myself, when I'm in the audience, I can fall into this category of asking, probing. Sometimes I don't mean to be contrarian, but I'm looking at this from a lot of different angles. So it's a person that asks a lot of questions and wants to continue to ask until they feel like they have everything to make a perfect decision. Now, I am a recovering skeptic here, you all. I try my best to not do this. But in my past, in teams and sales motions that I've ran, I've often even appointed somebody on my team inside a meeting to be the red team, the skeptic, so that we don't just get groupthink. I like to approach information from different angles. I like to have different types of questions being asked. I don't want everyone just agreeing with me. You shouldn't want people agreeing with you either, but it does become a little frustrating when you have that person that you're trying to help move things forward and they just come back with 5 more questions or 20 more questions. So identify them for what they are. They're a skeptic, and that's okay. We need those individuals as well. Use a skeptic to help you build out an FAQ list. Those are things that you can place on a website or accompany an agreement, but don't confuse that person with your champion. A champion is the person that moves your deal forward when the meeting is over, when you're not in the room, and they're doing it the right strategic players. Okay. So it's truly important that we have these people. It's truly important that we know them. So this is where I'm going to encourage you inside a meeting or inside a conversation to just remove from your vocabulary, what do you think? How do you feel? How did this conversation hit you? I do use conversational topics like that at certain points, but that should never be the end all be all of how you end a meeting. If you want to transition from a business or a demo into these next stage questions, sure. Ask a question that's a transitional, warm and fuzzy. What did you think? How do you feel? Could you see this being used? But then you need to get down to questions that actually empower you to know whether you have an opportunity or not. And I've listed 3 of them here. The first one, walk me through how a decision like this gets approved inside the organization at this bank or this credit union. I've been thinking about, in other conversations we've had, these players involved. Who else should be involved in the next conversation from your meeting? And by the way, on number 2 here, you should know the answer to this before you ask it. Before you go into a meeting, you need to take the 10 to 15 minutes and build out a buying committee based on what you know or based upon a hypothesis. And then ask during that meeting, here's what I've seen. We normally have this person involved. So I think that's Jen. I think that's Scott here, Randy, and Allison. Are there other people that should be involved in this next conversation as well? Let them correct you. It's okay if you didn't get it right. It's perfectly fine. Individuals, humans, we like to correct each other. So give them the chance and the ability to correct you. Let it roll off of you because you're absorbing new information that you can then use to schedule that next meeting with the broader audience and those actual committee members, those buying committee members. And then the third one here is one that I love. And it is, if you know that you are either working with a champion or speaking to one of those other named roles I mentioned earlier, you need to have a one-pager that is simple, a one-pager that is visual, and a one pager that can be forwarded around the organization quickly, along with a blurb introing what your company in this one pager is showcasing. And don't make it entirely self-serving. Make it easy for people to forward and easy for the recipient to consume. All right. So you can ask that person when you get that blurb and that one pager, hey, if I sent you a one pager, would you feel comfortable forwarding on internally to the people involved in the next meeting that we've identified with question number 2? So that's something for us to look forward to as we move forward here. I'm going to go ahead and just also address the elephant in the room. Your champion rarely is the person that's going to sign your agreement. It is not unheard of. That is the perfect situation that you speak to the person, they love you, they own the problem, they own the budget, and they have the signing authority. That is the day to go out and buy a lottery ticket, my friends. That is a good day in sales. But you're going to have to understand that that is also a rarity. And the person signing rarely your champion. So here's where we often find ourselves in sales, in banking and credit union sales, trying to figure out where to go. And I'm doing this because we often look at titles or levels. We often aim at the CEO, and I'm going to tell you that's a little too high, because the CEO might have some interest in what you're pitching. The CEO might also have a very aligned strategic priority to solving the problem that your solution does for their team. However, the CEO will 99.9% of the time defer to their team and suggest that their team instead go about making the decision and evaluating the vendors. So you don't want to reach too high when you're looking for a champion. You often won't find that at the C level. Instead, you need to look at another level within the organization. And that right level is the person who owns the problem. Like, that is job one when you're beginning any sort of conversation with a buyer or with a bank or credit union employee. You need to figure out, like, here's what we solve. Who has this problem? And is it a problem? Is it a pervasive problem? Is there urgency in solving this problem? If so, whose problem? How do they feel about it? Do they feel like if they don't get it solved, that it's not going away on its own? That is your person. That is your champion. That is the right level within the organization. So here's what I would suggest that you take a look at and consider. Champions are oftentimes not found. We don't often just get the luck of stumbling over these fine people. Instead, we're often building them. And we're building them strategically over the course of various conversations. So if you look at it like this, every FI that you speak with, they have, there's a win there. And you just have to figure out whose win it is. So again, who owns the problem? What is the problem? And are they interested in solving what you think is a problem? So when you look at the wins, we in sales often think of, they're looking for lower cost of deposits. They're trying to decrease their fraud losses. They're want to reduce their compliance burden or use AI to help with that. Or they want a better digital experience for their members, or there's a new fee income they wish to drive. And we often talk in these terms with our marketing materials, with our sales collateral. And these are not the wrong value propositions to touch on. These are important ones. And these are ones especially for your economic buyer and the decision maker. Your champion is going to be a person that, if you look to the right-hand side of the screen, they have these personal types of wins. A project that made their year and made them extremely visible within the organization. A board slide where their name and this project is shown next to it. Or they have a team and they're going to give them hours back. There's also a lot of personal clout and credibility. with these champions, going to events or stumbling across your solution and being the person that found it before the other competitors in the marketplace. Or the person that's looking for a promotion and they want to be able to point back and say, yeah, this solution, yeah, that was me. That was my decision. I'm the one that carried that forward. Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome very much. I'll take my promotion now, please. All right. So for these people that have a personal win, give them one. Give them before you ask for anything in return. So there are different ways that you can approach this when you're building out your champion. Give them something small and fast, something that gives them kind of an anchor point is a good example, like a benchmark to how other peer institutions look around the same topic, or offer to evaluate a workflow with a reverse demo. Something to where they can walk away at the end of the experience with the promise of friendship and you cheering them on, not another sales conversation unless you think that would make it meaningful from their point of view. Give them something as well after you give them something small and fast that makes them look smart or feel smart. So something that they can carry forward into a conversation and say, yeah, I've read this great article that was sent to me. It was about how Bank XYZ is doing this exact thing. I think we should take a look at it, and here's why. Because you want them to buy in to the idea. And you want to give them that personal win of making them the individual, the hero that brought it up to their bank or credit union before anyone else thought it was an issue. All right? And then give them a chance to prove the pilot. So the first kind of a conversation with a champion, perhaps it doesn't begin with a commercial agreement. Perhaps it does orient itself more around a pilot, a proof of value, a POC, whatever you want to call it. Give them a small win they can point to that then makes the next commercial conversation even that much easier. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next arena. And that is just going back to that, harkening back to that concept of making them the smartest person in the room about your solution. So we started by, on the prior slide, just making them a smart individual, making them feel smart or appear smart using some thought leadership angles, like an article. Now we're going to use that article or that thought leadership to showcase and point directly to your product. And to do that, we need that champion to not only know what's happening in the broader industry with thought leadership, but then how that pertains to your own solution. So this goes back to the whole concept that I'm a firm believer in, and that is, like, we don't have to sell them always on a new solution. Instead, as fintech founders and as sellers, part of our responsibility is to teach them how to buy us. So that's what we're going to get into next. They have to know the category. They have to know where you and your solution live. Is it in, if it's a lending solution, is it in intake? Is it in application and origination? Is it in underwriting? Is it in alternative data sources? Is it in maybe perhaps loan management, special assets, any of the bevy of solutions wrapping a loan application? Give them some point. Even if you're brand new and you do something different that goes across different areas or categories, or some entirely new category, give them a place to anchor to and then define for them why you're different. Okay. So you give them the category. Even if you have to lessen your scope, you can say something like, we actually happen to play within multiple areas in the loan origination and loan management process. But for the sake of beginning the conversation, we start at the intake layer and go all the way from before funding to after funding. And I'm happy to share with you the way that we do this differently. So give them a category, give them a comparison that does not speak badly about your competitors, even point solution competitors. Give them the credit where it's due. And you can say something like, fill in the blank vendor does a fantastic job. In fact, we run into them quite a bit or have some employees that came from them. What we have done a bit differently is state what you do differently. Nobody likes an individual that comes in with this pompous air or this arrogance, this complete lack of humility, talking about how everyone that came before them is doing it wrong or that the solution is just not up to par. Nobody likes those individuals. People don't like to do business with them or buy from them. So be authentic. Give those companies credit where it's due, and then just give people a comparison point that sounds like, unlike, we've taken a bit of a different approach. Unlike X, we do Y. Consider that. Try that one on. And then keep in mind common objections. And I always suggest that you evaluate with some voice of banker conversations, and you get to where you have at least 3 objections that you are ready to surface and preemptively answer. So that can sound something like, I know you're sitting there and you're wondering about 1, 2, 3. We hear this quite a bit, and here's the approach that we've taken and answers each of those questions. Make this sound like you, but don't wait for those questions with the hard answers to surface. Bring them up, hit them head on, and let the conversation move on and progress from there. Okay? You will thank me later for that. All right, now here's what I want you to know. After you start thinking in terms of these individuals, how we find them, how we build them, now we need to start thinking about equipping them. Because the best kind of a sales motion is one that happens when you're not in the room. It's the internal sell that happens, and that's sometimes the trickiest part. So we're going to get into that next. So here is something that I'm going to suggest to you always, regardless of where you are in your journey, pre-POC, pre-commercial agreements, or later on when you have 20 or 200 FIs using your solution. You need to begin by making it super easy for people in order to go about how they work on your behalf, okay? So here's 5 things I think you need to preemptively create. Don't wait until you're asked for it. Preemptively create, not from your point of view, but from your buyer's point of view. What are the questions they need answered with each of these different pieces? What do they need to feel good? This is not a time and a place for you to regurgitate all of your fantastic features that you've built into your solution. This is the time where you put yourself in your buyer's seat, in your champion seat, and you start thinking in terms of, okay, that champion is going to need to bring other people into the next conversation on my behalf. They probably want to set up that conversation to let these people know why they're being invited to this meeting. So let's give them a nice visual business case, limited to 1 page, that they can easily forward, the recipient can easily view, and give them some verbiage that's going to correspond with that. So it makes it just easy for them to copy and paste and send it on. Nothing that they have to author from the get-go. Number 2, numbers that they'll be challenged on. So like when you start thinking in terms of the investment or ROI figures, know what those are, at least a range. And you have to be prepared to talk at least in pricing ranges early in the process if you have someone that's trying to evaluate your solution. Because you're always going to have those people that are like, well, what does this cost? And you can say something like, the cost will depend upon the scope of work. I will absolutely tell you that as we get deeper, and I've pinpointed what I think you're going to need, or what we agree that you'll need, but it typically ranges between X and Y. Give these people these champions some metrics that they can then use and they can also share internally. Know the vendor risk answers. This is not going to be the time to sleep on things like SOC 2 Type 1 and or Type 2. You are going to need those, especially if you have any sort of interaction with customer data, account data, any PII, or you're reviewed as like a mission critical system. The institution comes to rely upon you. Just start establishing those types of elements and audits. But before you get there, before you get to SOC 2 Type 1 or Type 2, know the other information they're going to need, like your certificate of liability insurance, details about you as a company, a diagram of the workflow or the tech stack, things that are always going to be involved in a vendor management cycle. Just go ahead and have that handy and offer to send that. I wouldn't do that until later in the process. That's more of a post-demo, post-internal alignment kind of conversation, but have it. Don't wait to construct it. Have it out there and waiting and ready to go. Same thing with peer proof. Even if you don't have customers yet, you might have strategic advisors. You might have board members. You might have had countless conversations with bankers in what I call voice of banker conversations, where you've accumulated data about the problem. You have showcased how in a sandbox environment, you improve the details around that problem. Use what you can, and until you have results, use the buy-in from your strategic advisors, lean on their past experiences or connections being made for voice of banker interviews, okay? And then lastly, the forwardable summary. This is like an executive business case. This is where there's details similar to a blurb that they can copy and paste for a one page. Do this as well for executives that they might want to loop into the conversation. All right? Okay, moving on from there. You do want to write this all out, and you do want to author this. They might take it, they might change it, that's okay. But when you author it, it's something that can be easily filed in your own words. It can be forwarded as well. So this is where you don't want to use cutesy language or overly technical language, or the language that your outside marketing company is using for the website. You want to use language that is straightforward, in use by banks and credit unions, and that is meaningful and shows an impact for them. So here's where I'm going to provide for you some details around making it easy to file and what to exclude from this. So be sure when you are writing this out, especially that executive summary, you might indicate that this commonly is going to be something in play for the operations team members, that you don't have to say it comes out of their budget, but you can say it normally lives with or is overseen by. Indicate what it's replacing, what capabilities it's extending, which departments own it after it goes live, which regulations or exam questions are often also presented there. So as you can see over here, strip out the QC language, strip out any details about AWS or Azure. Those are important, but later on in the conversation in deeper technical deep dives. Nobody cares, by the way, about your funding round or your investors' names. They just don't. So save those for a different conversation. But anything as well you need to strip out that can't stand on its own, that is a word or a snippet of a phrase that you have to be in the room to explain. Strip it out, get rid of it, because otherwise that is just not going to be something that's going to be able to stand up on its own. It will be deleted. All right. Moving on then to the next conversation, I really do want you to think in terms of writing the email that your champion is going to send without you. And this might seem presumptive on your part, but I view it as a different type of approach. These people often have multiple things they're juggling, multiple things they're doing, folks. They are likely looking for some sort of a recommended text. I mean, my goodness, if you think about our email systems these days that are recommending responses for us to send, I'm just suggesting that you do the same thing here. And you can invite them to change it, but you can provide a starting point of the text. They may copy and paste it. They may use it as a starting point and change it and make it their own. But here's what I suggest you have in there: a subject line that conveys what you're doing, like a one sentence out there as well that that just kind of showcases what you're doing and why somebody should even care. 3 bullet points, like 3 to 5 is the max. A proof point as well, if you can point to somebody else using your solution, or if it's too early days, that's where you can rely upon. We have strategic advisors that have come from these organizations with this many years of experience, or we've spoken to X many bankers about this product, and here's what we've heard, where you're borrowing expertise, you're borrowing insights until you have them. And then an ask. And it's a 30-minute meeting. You can suggest dates. I always like to say, please forward some dates and times that work for you over the next couple of weeks. If easier, and only if it saves you from calendar management and email drafting, I'll supply my calendar link for you here. Something like that feels like a low lift. I often end a conversation by saying something like, and don't worry, at the end of the 30-minute meeting, I'll have a very clear idea of whether we may be able to provide value. And if not, we can always part as newfound friends. So give these people an out when you're asking for that next meeting. All right. So there's some rules that I've also provided for you there, but I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next slide. Oh, boy, I stink at using my mouse today. But here's what I want you to kind of keep in mind as we start to land this plane. The champion that's never embarrassed by bringing you to the table is one that you want. A champion who is somebody that you is always on the back foot in trying to provide some clarity or forward momentum for your solution, is one that will get burned by the process and won't be a champion again. Remember, our goal with champions is to make them the hero, to make them look like the absolute smartest people in the room. So make them that hero, equip them. Don't ever make them go into a room, what I think of as cold. So give them a brief and even rehearse some things. No, I'm not suggesting here, ladies and gentlemen, that you tell them what to say and have them repeat it back to you until they get it down word for word. But you can provide them the details they need and give them suggestions by saying things like, that might sound like, or if I were sitting there in the room, I might say something like, and then say what you would say, and then say, but I know you've got this. You know the team better than I do. Do you have any questions about what my recommendation is? And then help them. Be reachable. You don't have to be in the room, but if they need to text you right before walking into that room or that committee, or they need some insight from you, like, be there. That should be one of the most important meetings that is on your radar for the day as well. And then follow up with them afterwards, even if it's via text, even if they're dropping you a voicemail or you're dropping them a voicemail. Find out what went well, find out what did not go well, so that you can move for the deal forward in the same or the next day. All right. Now, when it comes to your champion, the champion, remember, is someone that broadens the audience. So you shouldn't have to worry too much about going around them. But If you are stuck in a scenario in which the closest person to a champion does not want anything to go around them and must go through them, you have to play these cards very, very carefully. I always suggest, and there are more advanced techniques that we're not going to cover today, but the best way to do it is to be asking, who else in addition to you should I be building a relationship with? Ask them to make the intros. Always copy them so they have visibility and you guys can discuss what any internal conversations that have happened afterward. And then frame every new contact as just building support for the case that they want, the business case that is meant to benefit them. All right. Now, this doesn't always work, but this has to be your first step. As I've mentioned, there are more advanced techniques that we're not going to address here. We're going to assume your champion is just that, a champion that wants the deal to progress forward, a champion that's willing to expend personal capital and goodwill in order to progress that deal forward. Perhaps in the future, we'll talk about scenarios in which that might not be the case. You might have an anti-champion on your hands in that scenario. All right. You do need to work and operate under the assumption always that your champion will leave, that your champion will get promoted, that your champion is going to move on, because eventually it may happen. In fintech sales, we don't tend to operate on a 4 to 6 month sales cycle. It's not unheard of. Those are my favorites, even shorter ones that we've seen in the industry as anomalies. But in a lot of cases, we're operating on a 12 to 24 month, sometimes longer time horizon. And there's a lot of movement that takes place within organizations, internally, as well as people moving to other organizations. The absolute worst scenario you can be in is sitting there thinking, all right, I have Stacy. She is my internal champion. And then Stacy goes elsewhere and you're stuck. So you need to start paying attention. You need to start building out multiple champions and sharing lots of information, creating lots of contacts and touch points across the FI. But you do need to watch for certain signals, like people that have gone quiet. If you have that scenario, again, like at a minimum, you need 2 people involved in a deal. And you need to always have the business case in writing. There's business case tools that I love and recommend, but you can also just create a written business case or a PDF that you send to people that they can also send, or you can send on their behalf when they're no longer at the organization. And when it comes time to recovering after somebody has left, you do need to go ahead and restart from the beginning, scrape it all back, learn from this experience, and begin building from a stage 0 scenario with new players, not just one person, not even just 2 people. When you're rebuilding, broaden the audience and bring everyone in and progress everyone along with the conversation at the same time, you guys. It's important. You will thank me later. If you just try to resume and try to act like nothing happened, these people are going to get confused. They'll stop interacting with you and your deal goes quiet. It goes dead overall. All right. Where this can break honestly depends on where you are. Okay. So if you are working in your journey, is what I mean by saying where you are, and you're working towards your first financial institution, you don't have logos, you can break at the identification area. So you need to go ahead and evaluate where you are. You need to take a look at your champion. You need to ask your champion for insights or to broaden the audience. Have asks for them. You have absolutely nothing to lose. If they say no, not your champion. Find somebody else that is. If you are a technical founder, it is super easy to break things in the equip level. So this is where questions about the product, like you've nailed them, and the risk and compliance and the budget and the commercial elements don't yet exist because you've been focused on building and engineering this amazing solution. It's not horrible. You just have to know when you're going into conversations, you're going to have to mentally switch gears and now start building out the equip stage. If you have a pilot that's in flight, your whole goal is proving value, landing the pilot directly into a commercial engagement. Keep your champion in the loop entirely throughout the process. Protect them and their reputation by doing absolutely everything within your power to make certain that before the next touch point, the next stage, they are properly equipped to convey the message. All right. And if you're that person that's done it all, you've sold, you've built, you've had multiple exits beforehand, you have to think about the language. If I look back, this is where many repeat founders have quite a bit of an advantage, but it can also be a bit of a disadvantage when they have to craft entirely new language and experiment with that and manage that and land that. Because you might be the cool person out on LinkedIn or at events, but you still have to convey your new solution in such a way that people can categorize and understand it, compare it, and then carry it forward. All right? So just watch out for those types of hiccups or areas where things could break. So you do have one champion commonly. You can have more, but one is the standard. And that person has to be able to do things for you. And I think of these as four things that you'll notice are familiar from the prior slide, areas that can break. So this is where this individual helps you identify like who to spend that personal capital on, what conversations are feeling hard, what are the barriers around your product. These people help you build. They help you build the business case, identify personal wins and metrics. These are people you need to equip with the one-page business case, the executive summary narratives, the answers around risk and vendor management as well. And these are people that you need to protect. You need to protect their own relationships, their own career progression. You need to understand what's in it for them, what they have at stake and on the line in working with you. And you need to do everything in your power to protect that. That might include rehearsing them. It might include enabling them with new material. It might mean offering to come in and do a board presentation. This can look different depending upon the solution, depending upon the spend for your solution, and depending upon the champion and organization that you're working with. Be open to helping them. That is absolutely our goal. All right. So here's what I'm going to suggest you think about this week. You have deals, you have opportunities that are in progress right now. If you're an early stage founder or an early stage repeat founder, figure out in those deals the person, your champion, name them. And I'm hoping it's not the only name that's in your CRM for that account, but name that person, especially if it's a stalled deal or a mid-stage or down funnel deal, and name them and figure out what's in it for them. What's their personal win? Then ask them a question around the decision. That question I shared with you earlier, which is, walk me through how this actually gets approved here at institution XYZ. Then draft a one-pager for them. Now, this can be generic or this can be branded to them based upon what you've heard. Use this as an asset that they can carry internally along with a drafted summary for them. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that this information finds you at the right time in your sales journey, in your selling journey for your fintech solution. Until then, I'm going to wish you luck out there selling your fintech product. Stay tuned for the next iteration of the Fintech Onramp, where we're going to be covering another topic related to early stage revenue and generating that revenue. Take care. Have a great weekend.